This week, Guy, or Guy, depending on how you pronounce it. I've always said Guy. Bruneau, senior security consultant with IPSS, joins us to discuss Infosec Careers, his work with the SANS Institute, and end-user awareness training. In the security news, when hackers are not behind the outage, when hackers are behind rerouting traffic, neat pseudo keystroke logger, when cross-site scripting leads to code execution, TLS inside, post-quantum encryption that doesn't hold up to pre-quantum computers, Lockbit loading Cobalt Strike using Windows Defender. We love authentication bypass and impress your coworkers with my Linux command of the week. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly.
Every hack follows the same pattern. First, hackers exploit a human error, like a leaked key or a secret left in code. They gain a foothold and then pivot, moving from one compromised system to the next. Teleport breaks this cycle. Open source Teleport gives every engineer, every piece of hardware, every application an identity, replacing secrets like passwords and keys with auto-expiring identity-based certificates. Learn why most visionary businesses in the world choose Teleport at securityweekly.com/teleport. Welcome everyone to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 750, recorded on Wednesday, August 3rd, 2022, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. Welcome, Mr. Adrian Sanabria.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Happy to be here. Happy to fill in, and always a good time. I'm looking forward to your favorite your Linux command of the day.
I made that up on the fly, like it's my Linux command of the week. I hope that doesn't mean I'm on the hook for a Linux command of the week every week now.
You're on the hook.
I've listened to a lot of Linux podcasts, and so I got some good tips there. So maybe we'll make it a regular thing. Who knows?
There's enough. You could totally do one a week.
Yeah, we got plenty of source material there. The Linux Dad of the Week award goes to Mr. Josh Marpet, who is here with us while with baby.
2-week-old baby. Yeah, Laurel.
There we go, baby. Hopefully you get a little break from kid duty in a little while.
Yeah. Janice is going to be back in just a few minutes. She's just running late.
No worries. Look at you multitasking. Your baby's beautiful, by the way, too.
Oh, thank you. I think so, but I'm biased, so
That's
thank you.
True.
Independent confirmation is always welcome.
Thank you for joining us this evening. The quick announcement before we get started. If you like the show and you wouldn't mind going into your favorite podcast catcher and giving us a rating, we would be eternally grateful. I know many of you have listened to the show for like a really long time, and if you haven't done this in quite some time, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and do it, like an Apple Podcast or Spotify, or podcast catchers have changed a lot over the years. Almost all of them have some type of ranking system that really helps us in those ecosystems. So thank you all so much for doing that. And I had a really awesome introduction for Guy Bruneau, but it's not on my teleprompter. So, Guy, do you want me to say Guy or Guy?
Might as well say Guy. That's usually how I'm called.
Excellent. Guy Bruneau and I met several years ago when I was first getting into cybersecurity. I believe you were one of, if not the primary SANS instructor, who reviewed some of the first things I ever wrote in cybersecurity. And I apologize for that looking back on it now. But and Guy, you've worked in cybersecurity for 20 years?
That's possible. I'm not sure, but that's what SANS has been around now for teaching, 22 years. Really, the first real certification for SANS were 2000. That's when it really started.
Yeah, in 2000, I wrote a paper for my GX certification, and I think you were the person who read it and graded it. And
is this a Unix?
No, it wasn't you. It was the intrusion detection cert.
GCIH?
GCI.
Oh no, detection.
GCI.
GCIA.
GCIA. Yes.
That would be Security 503.
Yes.
But I wasn't a course reviewer for, not course, but paper reviewer for Security 503. I was for the Unix track. Actually, I was the lead grader for that track until it closed.
Gotcha.
For the gold papers.
Well, this is like 20 years ago, so.
That's, well, yeah, maybe 17 years ago when it stopped doing the gold papers, and then it was silver or gold, depending. So you weren't stuck having to take a track and write the paper in 4 weeks.
Right, which I did.
Because that was the early days.
But let's just say it you because it sounds better for the story. So you said I did an amazing job explaining what a buffer overflow was, and that gave me a whole bunch of confidence. So let's just I thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Well, Guy, it's great to have you on the show. Guy, how'd you get your start in information security?
Actually, it was around 1995 when I became sysadmin for our sites. We were looking at putting some networks with Banyan Vines and Solaris and HPUX, not HPUX, but Solaris. And at that point, they asked me, because I just finished writing a program that we were all using in Pascal. I said, well, would you want to be a sysadmin? We're setting up networks. I said, sure. And really, that's when it all started. So I did that for 2.5 years until 97, when I was picked to start a vulnerability analysis team with 5 other people. So, and that's more or less really when I started in security. At the time, I don't know how many of you might remember Ballista as a scanner.
Vaguely. Oh my God, that's way back.
Yeah, that was bought by, or became CyberCop at that point, because it was bought by NAI at that point. The two main guys that actually I met, because they were from Alberta, the creator of CyberCops, were Alfred Hugger and Oliver Friedrich, which I'm sure you both know because they've been in the security industry for a long time.
Yeah, those names ring a bell.
Well, Oliver, this is the 4th company, I think, that he's more or less started.
Is that the company?
They moved both with NAI for several years.
And is that the company you work for today? Is the one that they founded, or?
No. The company I work for now is the company I more or less, after I retired from the military, that I joined in 2002. Actually, we just celebrated our 20th year. I'm not an owner, but I'm one of the 2 left founder of the company as security consultants. So I've been with this company now for 20 years, and it's a security company that's mainly government, but we've also done work in the States and Europe as well.
Mm-hmm. I just want to point out that being in a company for 20 years, in an information security company for 20 years, you're probably the only one left. Like
with another guy. Oh, there's only 2 of us left. Yeah.
Damn.
2. Well, we were only 6 really when we started. 4 security consultant. Well, actually, the company was founded with 6 owners, and now there's 1. So 1 owner who's the original owner, with 2 security consultants that are still with the company. So that's it is a long time to be with a single company.
Yeah, Josh, one that can beat that is Mikko Hyppinen. I started reading his new book. If it's smart, it's vulnerable, I think is the name of it. And he mentions he's been at F-Secure since 88 or something like that.
Whoa.
89.
No.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a long time to be with the same company. Obviously, he's either got good stock, good pay, he's happy. all this stuff counts.
Happiness is important. Guy, I want to go back to early in your career. You said you're working with Sun and Banyan Vines and stuff like that. Then you said you made a transition to doing what sounded like vulnerability analysis. Is that what you say you started?
Yep. So I did this for about a year and a half because the department at the time didn't have an incident response team. And so in 1998, that was when I first got a commercial IDS course. At the time, it was called NetRanger, which became Cisco Secure IDS for a very long time. So actually, when I got the course in this, I think it was around April '98, the company just got bought out by Cisco, and my certificate said NetRanger by Cisco or something like that. I still have the certificate somewhere. I guess hilarious. I could have dug it up.
Yeah, I remember. I remember that because I remember when I got into IDS in around 2000. And that acquisition was fairly new. And when we're studying what's available out there for intrusion detection systems, everyone was like, "Oh, there used to be this really cool product called, in company called NetRanger, but it got bought by Cisco."
Yeah. Well,
I like the way you put that, but it got bought by Cisco, so then it died, disappeared, and went into the ether.
But this is also this. I'm speaking I should say historically speaking. It was when we would say that this is over 20 years ago. Cisco's done a much better job. Cisco. Yeah.
Yeah, there's pre
SourceFire,
yeah, and post SourceFire, post Martin Roche.
Yeah, actually, I was at a SANS conference when Marty announced that he was starting SourceFire in 2001, 2. I think it's 2001 or 2. Anyway, I have a picture of it. We're in a restaurant with Stephen Northcutt and his wife and my wife and Marty's wife, and he says to us, "I'm starting SourceFire." At the time, didn't really know where that would go, but I knew about Snort. Obviously, it was up and coming.
It did pretty well, 2 billion, if I recall.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It would have been worth to invest, but at the time, I didn't have the money to put into anything like this.
Yeah, I've been in those situations too. Yeah, it happens. It happens. But
so basically, for the next 3 years, I became a founder of the incident response team with 6 other people until we expanded to we went to 13 people. So we had two separate teams, 1 team or 3 teams that were doing still VA vulnerability analysis, and the other 3 teams were doing a startup for intrusion detection. And this is where I really got into working with intrusion detections.
And what was
both systems that we had at the time were Real Secure and Cisco Secure IDS. Real Secure didn't really like that much because it was running on Windows and it wasn't as stable. But for a deployed kit, it was good enough at the time.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole ton of options back in those. We're talking late 90s, right?
Yep. But in '99, I went to my first SANS conference in San Diego, and this is where I met Stephen Northcutt and got this great book.
Oh, that's the original Shadow.
That's So that was given to us at the time at the conference, and obviously Stephen was more or less selling Shadow, how it works, and how that could help intrusion detection. So I guess some of you might remember, what's his name? Stephen, but also, let me see here.
Judy.
Because I took some note. I mean, I can't remember everything over a period of 25 years.
You're in good company. I have to constantly look up names. I'm constantly forgetting things. No shame.
Yeah. Okay. So I went to meet Fred Kirby at the Naval Warfare Center in Virginia. And at that time, Stephen was actually leaving the organization to join SANS full-time to write courses and stuff. So I went to see Fred Kirby. Some of you might have met him. He was an instructor for SANS for several years.
Yeah, I know.
Remember
Fred.
him?
I do.
Fred Kirby. Anyway, I went and met Fred and wanted to know how they were using Shadow in their network, because at that point I was still in the Canadian Forces. So we wanted to know how they were using Shadow. So I went to meet with him. Yeah.
Could you explain to our audience what Shadow was? Because I don't think people have an appreciation. Like, if you do intrusion detection today, like back then it was like, if you're going to build a house, you cut the trees down by yourself to get the wood kind of experience.
Yes. So basically what the Naval Surface Warfare Center had done with the help of Stephen is create a system using TCP dump that would parse through a bunch of CGI script, the traffic every hour. It basically give you a picture of all the connection between the source and the destination, which ports they connected to. And that way we were able to identify unusual activity. So instead of having rules that would, like a snort or whatever intrusion detection system that you're using, this was basically parsing all the traffic on a single web page every hour, which you could review and look for unusual traffic. For some people that have taken old SANS course, they probably remember seeing those traces in, say, Security 503, where they showed some more or less shadow traces in there.
Yeah, that was my introduction to intrusion detection. And when I think about it now, and even years after I took it, I was like, everyone should, if you're going to do security, understand those fundamental building blocks and do it the manual way. It's almost like, doing math without a calculator. Like, you had to understand all the TCP dump, BPF filter kind of commands, which force you also to understand what all the headers look like, where all the offsets were. And you would construct queries, essentially, that were looking at packet streams that would pull out weird things. It was interesting, just not even from a packet perspective, but just from a thought process to go, when I look for weird things in security, like, that was a really good example of how to look for weird things that you could apply to other things when you're looking at logs, or when you're looking at any, security product, or open source or not, or freely available today, those same kind of things, looking for anomalous behavior. I thought it was an essential fundamental building block.
Yeah, so you're right. It was more or less the anomaly detection system of the day. So after that point, I started teaming up Shadow with my intrusion detection system, because the intrusion detection system would see some stuff, but if I wanted to review the packet or the activity, I was able to go into the Shadow system and look at the pattern that may have occurred based on this detection. So
let's be clear. You were able to do that with a low-code, no-code approach, just using an API, telling it to connect. It was not a big deal, right?
That's right. Not only that, they had published their packages. So more or less, all you had to do is build your own box and use their package and set it up for your own network, and there you go. It works.
Yeah,
so it was very simple.
Oh, good. Okay, because most things back then to do integrations was not,
Yeah. Well, when you think about it, this, I guess, was the start of what the system that we use today, like NetWitness, for example, has been around now for 12, 15 years. And more or less it's doing this, but it also has a bunch of parsers that will transform the traffic that it collects into something that you can easily query. We couldn't really do that with Shadow unless you went to the script of the command line and queried the packets that you collected. And even then, at the time, space was limited, so you would only take, I don't know, the first 100 bytes or 150 bytes of the traffic, and hopefully what you're looking for might be in that payload.
Adrian?
Hey, I'm interested to get your opinion on this, but maybe it's just how I remember things, but back in the early days when most of your intrusion detection rules were built and shared by the community, there are a lot of lists and things like that for sharing these detections. It seemed back then like it was much more focused and manageable. And once we started to see these larger commercial products kind of competing on how many detections they had. And we kind of saw something similar with vulnerability scanners. Like they started competing on, oh, we've got more checks than they do, right? Like we've got more vulnerability plugins and checks than they do. It seems to me that that commercialization of it, that marketing, that competing on just raw number, made it a lot tougher to manage and tune these things. Is that just is that just hindsight bias, or
no? I think I tend to agree. I mean, if you use a commercial, like for example, when we both had Real Secure and NetRanger or Cisco Secure IDS, when the company started more or less making their stuff secret sauce, more difficult to understand, why did this trigger or this signature, like for example, Real Secure would trigger on a bunch of stuff that you read the signature, you weren't sure what it was, why it picked it up, because you couldn't see the rule. At least Snort over the years and SourceFire kept the rules open. And Suricata, which is another project that I find really good as well, all the rules are open, so you know what it's triggering on, and makes it a lot easier to tune the sensor.
And yeah, Shadow was interesting, just to go back to that for a moment, because it used almost like off-the-shelf tools. I think the CGI scripts were the part that they wrote was largely like off-the-shelf tools. I think it laid the foundation for folks like Marty and Ron Gula and others, even up today through Suricata, right, to build these more complex systems because they had that history and foundation to fall back on.
Yeah, because those systems were open then. So you could see how it functioned, how it detect, how it failed to detect. But when you have secret sauce in the product, it's great if it picks everything, but it's not always the case, especially when you're dealing with tons of false positives. Like, for example, right now, if you're using an IDS and 80% of your traffic is encrypted and you're not decrypting before you inspect, you're going to get majority of your stuff is going to be false positive.
Mm. It's amazing how that a lot of things have changed, but a lot of things have stayed the same with respects to intrusion detection, right? We still do it today. It just takes on different shapes, forms. Back when, in the time we were talking, in the before times, right, in the olden days, it was a lot more of network analysis to find all the component, or most of the components of the attack, at least the first stage, right? Largely was network traffic. That's how attackers got in back then, was port scanning, vulnerability scanning, exploiting an exposed service, and then getting shell. Now, from there, you had to rely on your system unless they were to pivot internally. But a lot of that telemetry, it was really a lot about networks. Now today our threat landscape is different, but the network is still important. Keith, speak today about how we use some of those skills and tactics on the network side today.
Well, I think the community is moving onto the host. Because unless you're decrypting the traffic, there is no. It's a lot more difficult to understand what's going on in the payload. So you have to look at the host and do the detection from the host side. And I'm not sure IDS still have the same value as they used to have because of the fact of the encryption. And now TLS 1.3 is coming, so I don't know how much this is going to change the landscape, but it's sure going to make everything a lot more difficult to see what's going on in the traffic. You can see that there's an exchange between a client and a server on some port, but what's going on in between, unless you're on that host and looking at what it's accessing, there's very little you can do until it starts beaconing or doing something that looks unusual.
Mm. Do you think we have to decrypt the traffic in order to be effective using network analysis?
Maybe, but at some point that even might be even if we decrypt it, some boxes that you own will decrypt it, like a proxy will decrypt the traffic, inspect it, re-encrypt, and do some kind of stuff, but that doesn't mean you have access to the packets, which is what we used to look at, say, 10 plus years ago. So we're losing sort of that. So what to me that I found now that I've been working in the cloud for a couple of years is the logs. The better the logs, you still get a pretty good picture of what's going on inside the network.
Adrian?
Yeah, many different ways to handle that. Yeah, it's I was just saying in our back channel chat that there's some vendor product marketing people screaming as you were talking about network traffic becoming less useful. But there's, it's interesting. Like, you can look at it from two different ways. So one breach that I've spent way too much time analyzing is the Equifax breach. And that's actually how they discovered the attack, was with IPS. And it wasn't until they updated their certificates on their TLS inspection device that they saw it, because their certificates had been expired for over a year. And so in two sides, you've got one set of people saying, see, the technology works, but you have to maintain it. And then on the other side, people saying, yeah, this is just way too much overhead to maintain. It's not surprising that it went a year without being updated, because it's, there's only so much stuff that you can manage and you can put on security folks to manage. So
true, but if you have a regular audit system that tells you your vulnerability and you do nothing about it, I mean, there is a good chance you're going to get compromised. So there's two sides of the medal. You have to make sure that you patch on time. In the cloud, it's getting easier because the cloud is constantly doing analysis against your traffic in your host. But on site, you have to maintain the same rigorous scans and audits, and hopefully patch in time.
Yep. It was literally within an hour of updating those certs that they knew they had a problem. And
now, Adrian, those certs were so they could access the IPS, or were those certs so the IPS could decrypt traffic?
So the IPS could decrypt traffic.
Okay, I got you.
Okay, so the IPS had the decryption key. Well, that's important too. If you can decrypt on the IPS and inspect, that's perfect.
I'd argue.
So what we're saying is that they were not able to decrypt for over a year, and nobody raised the alarm.
No, they knew. It was just one of those things that just kept getting pushed off, which is one of the things I love about this particular breach, is that we have literally quotes from people on like, okay, well, why didn't you do this? They were being questioned about this stuff because it was a House subcommittee, investigation. And that's why the details of that are public. But no, it was just your general, political, large corporation procrastination type stuff.
Somebody wasn't assigned to maintain and review the security posture of this box.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it was leadership.
But
Yeah.
I would argue though,
Culture.
if you're not going to decrypt the traffic, you better have great telemetry on the network traffic on at least the layer 3 protocol side of it. And you need to have great visibility on your endpoints, hosts or servers or whatever, right? You need to be really good, like outside of looking into the payload of those packets. You got to be really good at your host logs and host monitoring, and really good at like your net flow kind of analysis, and piece those two things together if you can't see inside the traffic.
Well, another place that is a great place to review what's going on is obviously DNS, your logs.
Yep.
I mean, I wrote a paper on DNS Sinkhole in 2010 because the client I was working at, we were not getting the visibility that we wanted. Like, we couldn't tell who was going where and how to block it. So it took me a while to research on the web what was out there, and there was really not much at the time that to go by, except some ISP in South Korea that were kind of talking about sinkholing traffic, but not really explaining how they were doing it. So after months of testing, I came up with this DNS sinkhole. And basically, as soon as we put it in the network, we detected immediately a bunch of hosts that were beaconing to two sites by host name, and by reviewing the traffic, there was also an IP address involved with it. So that was a good way of also detecting systems that are compromised.
Okay, there was a note in here about Infosec Careers. I mean, given what we just covered, right? People who are getting into the field today likely have a different experience than some of us just described, right? Like we described having to look at TCP dump packet captures manually on the command line, and I think people should do that. Still important, but likely not some of the tooling you might be using today to get into the field. So I mean, I guess my question is, how do we entice people to get in the field? What kinds of things should we be teaching them, and what's that experience look like today versus 20 years ago?
The way I see it, if you like playing with or knowing what's going on, first of all, you should probably start at home, and the traffic that your home systems actually see. I mean, I've been tapping my home for years now. I mean, I have different taps. I just changed taps because now I'm on fiber. So this little tap here I was using for several years.
What's that?
That's from Dualcomm.
Dualcomm, that's a Dualcomm, yep.
Yeah, Dualcomm. They have great little taps. So I had to switch to a 10-100 1 gig because this was only 10-100, so I was losing packets. But I would say start with home. Actually, on Windows, if you're using Windows, there's a packet sniffer on there as well. I mean, I wrote an article on the Incident Storm Center about how to sniff packet with your laptop. And obviously there's Linux that you can use, or Mac OS for those who owns that. So that's a great place to start. You don't have to start with TCP dump. You can start with Wireshark, which now is supported on all the OS, to see what your computer does. I mean, to me, it's more about being curious about what's going on. That's really how you can start. Plus, there's tons of YouTube videos on all kinds of way to look at traffic, whether it's in the cloud now. I've been reviewing a lot of Microsoft videos on how to use Sentinel, which is a SIM for collecting logs on in Azure. But there are tons of videos that you can use and even download packets from sites that are providing them, so that they're telling you it's mail, say traffic. So you open it with Wireshark, look at it. NetWitness also has what they call NetWitness Investigator, which is free, and it's kind of like their decoder but runs on Windows. So that's another place to start.
I also like the Security Onion and Bro IDS to get people started as well. I know it's a little bit setup, but once you get through that, that's a great way to start analyzing stuff. Right? And I like Bro.
Isn't that Zeek now?
Sorry, it is Zeek now.
Yeah, Zeek.
I like Zeek as in IDS, right? Because it gives you a lot of that great telemetry and gives you things, to your point, Guy, how you start to investigate. And I think also
understand what's going on your own network.
Yeah, and if you're on a home network and you use Steam, you're going to be like, what is all that traffic coming from that one application?
There's a lot of
Steam does a lot of weird stuff. Like if you're like folks like us who have looked at a lot of packet captures, if you have Steam on a system, you're looking at a packet capture, all of our like alert bells and whistles were going on like, hold on, I got to investigate what is all that stuff.
Where is that traffic going and why?
Yeah. Between each
IoT
other,
devices too.
Yeah.
Lots of weird stuff.
Yeah.
Lots of weird broadcast traffic too. Like if you have a Chromecast or something like that, the way a lot of this stuff works is really weird. And it's they do it to make it convenient and easy to set up and to use. Because it's all about reducing friction. For somebody who's has no experience with configuring networks or anything like that. If you think about this, people have to buy these very sophisticated network devices to set up streaming, to print, to do different things in their network with zero, expertise in this kind of stuff. So a lot of these protocols are very noisy, sometimes insecure, because the general assumption is that home network is going to be NATed, so they get a little bit more leeway,
Now, along those lines, in doing research for my day job, I want to back Guy's statements up about getting an actual tap for your network. Because as I look into things like Intel's management engine, it has direct access to the network that is outside of your main CPU and outside of your operating system's kernel. Which I was reading, I think yesterday, someone said, well, if you start up a packet capture on the OS on your hardware, if Intel's management engine, or more appropriately the AMT, does network communications, you won't see that in the packet capture because it's directly talking to the hardware independent of the kernel. So you won't see it if you're on Wireshark on your system. I'm like, oh, yeah, I never thought about it that way. So making sure you have a tab, I think, is really important.
Yeah, another interesting tap is this one.
Yeah, what is that one? Is that the Shark tap?
Shark tap USB.
Yeah.
Yeah, so USB. It's actually pretty good. It's good for investigator. You can plug it onto your USB and run Wireshark and pull the packets.
I've got the 5-port Netgear one where you can configure any of the 5 ports as a tap.
Oh, and Tyler was telling me Ubiquiti switches are really good for packet captures. He had a great experience with that.
Yeah,
I've got one, but I wanted to go. I think it does it in software, and I wanted to, use a hardware one. So that's the route that I went. So I actually have, this Netgear switch that I have the tap off of is plugged into a Ubiquiti switch upstream.
Yeah, he has the dream machine in the hole. I mean, he's all in on the Ubiquiti.
Living the dream machine.
I've got the dream machine. It's literally, you can see it right behind me, actually.
Is that a dream machine?
That's it right there. Yeah, that's a Ubiquiti Dream Machine Pro. That's the latest version. I actually got an early access one, and that's a Wi-Fi 6 access point, mesh access point.
Is that from Ubiquiti? Is that from Ubiquiti as well? The Wi-Fi 6 one?
Yeah.
People said Wi-Fi 6 is. We're getting way off topic, Key. We're real nerds. We all are.
Sorry.
My new laptop has Wi-Fi 6, but
yeah. So people said Wi-Fi 6 is like just as fast as their Ethernet cable, basically. I mean, they've always said that about the new wireless standards, but I'm hearing people like actually say like, no, it's true this time.
So it is until you get 4 feet away.
Josh, to your left, is that a Cat5 cable, or are you doing slackline like practice? You doing some gymnastics?
No, I'm in my wife's office, and we're still setting up we just moved a month ago. So the fiber for the ONT from Verizon Fios is down underneath the desk over here, but the electric outlet that they put it next to is switched by the light switch on the door. Every time you hit the light switch, you turn the ONT off. So it's like. So we ran a cable over there to the top of the file cabinet, and so that's where the Dream Machine lives, as well as the one of the house access points. And then I've got actually out the window here, not a joke, out the window is one of the lines off of the Dream Machine to go to the wireless bridge with 2 nanostations to the garage, where I've got a Wi-Fi 6 access point in the garage.
All temporary though.
No, well, some of it's temporary, some of it's not.
But that's for when Janice kicks him out and he has to go to the garage. He wants to make sure he has Wi-Fi when he's in the doghouse.
Probably should drill a hole in the wall and put the wire through it.
It's a flat Cat5 cable, so it's one of those flat Cat5 cables. Yeah, and it just goes. The window just closed and locked right on top of it, so it's no problem.
Oh,
but so you're asking about 1 gig, and so I have gigabit Fios here at the house, and I can run a test off of the actual Dream Machine, and it runs at about 980 down and about 920 up. And but if you get on the wireless, even though it's Wi-Fi 6, unless you have a Wi-Fi 6 chip in like your laptop key, you're not going to get even close to that. But effectively, it's not
close to that. To be honest. You don't need to get even close to that.
Oh, no.
To be honest.
Yeah. Anything above 10.
Steam and you just want Cyberpunk 2077 as quick as possible.
Right. Now, Guy, I wanted to go back to your work with SANS, right? You described some of your early SANS experiences, but how did you come to know SANS above and beyond what you've kind of disclosed to us already?
Now, that's a good question. So back in 2000, the end of 99, early 2000, when Stephen Northcott started doing the courses for SANS, he contacted me. So he contacted me, wanted to know to how he could come to, say, Ottawa here in Canada to run a SANS conference. So actually, the first SANS conference that was outside the U.S. was here in Ottawa in August 2000.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
Until now.
So, so look, this was the first time I taught SANS at night. Whoops.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
So I kept it, obviously, because it's a souvenir, I guess, my first SANS conference. So from that point on, they came back to Ottawa 2 years after that. So I was always helping for this. And the last SANS conference that ran here in Ottawa was, I think it's 2007. 2008 or 9. Anyway. And at that time, I had actually been running some of the part of the SANS conference. Actually, the last one that was in Ottawa, I think, was 5 tracks. And I was the one that took care of everything. They haven't been here since then, but I helped with some of the SANS conference in Toronto as well. And anyway, sometime after that, more or less, I became less and less involved and more involved in the work with our company. But for
just because you have a
10
day
years,
job,
pardon me?
Just because you have a day job, you traitor, you.
That's right. I have a day job, and my clients don't want me to retire either. They want to clone me, but that's not a possibility.
Not yet.
Well, you've got kids. Come on, train them up right.
Yeah, well, my kids are not in that. They're in close. Well, my youngest is 29, so he's already got his own career, and it's not in anywhere in security.
It happens. It happens. I also had
Yeah, you can't force somebody to do something they don't want to do, and I guess that could be getting into who wants to do security. Well, you can't really force people to do something they don't want to do. Sometimes they try, and that's not for them. Like I've seen people try and say, "Well, that's really not for me," and they move on and do something else.
Well, that's a great segue into end user awareness training. Speaking of making people do things they don't want to do.
Yeah.
Very nice. Nicely done, Paul.
Don't click on stuff
But
that
they wanna click
you
on
are not
stuff.
familiar with.
And then when they click on stuff, you make them do end user awareness training, and they don't want to do that either.
But we pay you to click on stuff. That's your job.
Well, maybe they want to test the incident response team. That's why they're happy clicker. That's usually how I call these people, happy clicker. Click, click.
Yep.
And then
That's a great.
you have to
That's a
respond.
great. I was just testing you guys. I was just seeing, if you were paying attention.
Oh, I'm testing
Yeah.
you guys. Yeah. Let me see if you actually see those clicks.
Mm.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Good. You're okay. You pass. No.
Did it go-
Try
did-
again.
Did it get blocked or did it go through? Who knows? Until you have to respond to it. But yeah,
I mean, 0%. Whoever gets to
Yeah.
zero clicks, nobody. So I mean,
yeah.
regardless of how good your program is, you still have to plan for somebody clicking, right?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the questions. So I've been involved with the Incident Storm Center since 2009. But before that, actually, here's another good story. In 1999, because I started knowing Steven, I was probably some of you remember the Y2K that SANS had more or less releasing daily reports on some of the traffic that was seen around the globe. So I was one of the few people that were working with Steven on these, I guess, daily reports for a couple days until 2000 around January. And then more or less I didn't do anything until I asked Johannes to come back as a handler. And if some of you are listening, we're always looking for handlers as well. So that's a good place to start. But I also been a SANS reviewer for the Secure the Human training for end user since 2009, I think, as well. So basically, I'm the French-Canadian reviewer. So as you probably know, I think the training is translated in about 30 different languages. So someone translated in French, and I look at it to make sure it meets the Canadian French training or language. So that's my role in it. So I've had a lot of training when it comes to end user training for this kind of security training. I've read every videos, every documents since, and over the last 2 years, they've done a lot of new training for the Secure the Human.
Guy, in your opinion, what's the best tactic to have the most successful end user awareness and training?
Be really careful and review. It's mostly emails, obviously. So basically, review the email and read to make sure that what it says appears right, correct, that you're not being exploited. These days, I also get a lot of these phone calls or phone texts. Click on this or press one from Amazon because your credit card is being charged this much. I mean, all those are scams.
Yeah,
so you have to be careful and reread.
The way I communicate that to folks is verify and then trust. When you receive a communication, verify and then trust. If you go the opposite, it's too late. You already clicked on it,
Don't click right away. Read and reread if you have to, and reread again because it doesn't look right.
Yeah,
especially
but with like my wife. Love her to death. She's been around me for a really long time, which is saying something right there, right? Special individual, but she goes, "Was that like a phishing email?" She's like, "What did I just click on?" And I look at it, I'm like, she's like, "Then I got an email that like I clicked on something I wasn't supposed to." I'm like, "You just got phished from the simulated phishing for your organization." And I'm like, "You know what? Don't talk to me right now. I'm not speaking to you." I'm like, I can't even. I'm like, I can't even. She's like, "Oh no." She's like, "But I was expecting something from HR," and she had like a legitimate question about her hours that she was asking from HR, and the simulated phish was from HR. But like a lot of folks are in that particular situation, and I'm like, remember the verify and then trust. I'm like, send HR an email, say, did you send me this email? But because she was caught up in the moment, she's got her work phone, there's kids and dogs running around, and she clicked it.
All right, we've got evidence here. User awareness training, breaking up marriages,
that's right.
pushing people apart, putting a wedge between
I made her go sleep on the couch that night.
The other thing to do is call the person that sent the email if you know that person.
That's what I.
If you don't know the person, it's likely a fish of some sort.
But that gets harder in larger organizations because you may not, and especially with people working from home, you may not have that kind of relationship. I was listening to
with your wife?
Hardy. No, not with my wife. But G-Mark Hardy was talking about like he puts in his contracts and invoices, if someone contacts you to change the bank routing information and the account number to send the payment, he's like, you have to call me. Like I will never change that without like some level of communication. And I'm like, if you work with a client where like the client knows me, I know the client, they know me by first name basis, that can work. But what happens when you're in a really large corporation and someone calls up and says, "Hey, this is G-Mark Hardy. I'd like to, change my routing information." Like that can get really difficult. And no disrespect to G-Mark. I think what he is advocating for is absolutely spectacular, and I'm totally copying it. Right, to have some verbiage in there, especially for direct transfers, to go like, if this changes, there should be a well-defined and fairly lengthy process to go, I want to change where the money's going, right?
But there's also, I understand the size of the organization, but there's also a global access list, or GAL, that we call in Microsoft. So you could go check there to make sure that person exists and it's the right number as well. Mm-hmm. But if you really don't know, just delete it. If that person was really trying to
they'll call you.
Get to you, they would call you or send you another email.
Right. Or better yet, like if that person is being targeted, go into the employee hierarchy, right, and call that person's manager, right? Because maybe that person isn't under attack. Because a lot of impersonation, SIM swapping. Like I'm being super ultra paranoid right now. But maybe validate that through like, maybe it's not a third party, but it's like a 2.5 party, call a person's manager or whatever and go like, you're trying to change how, can you verify with your employees that you're trying to change how money's being transferred? Like it's that level of validation I think we need to get to train our users to have that level of, like we say, awareness, but more importantly, validation, especially when you're doing certain activities like transferring money.
And check the sender email address. Mm-hmm. I get a lot of these emails that says Gmail on as a sender, but they're talking about some company stuff. I'm like,
right.
Yeah, sure. A company would never send you an email with a Gmail address. They would send you the email based on their company mail server. So that's another way, or even put your cursor over the link, the URL, to see if it all makes sense. That's another place to start.
Yeah, so a couple of things here. Like my kids will often come to me with things and say, "Hey, is this a fish?" Oftentimes it's text based, and the most often just looking at the link at the URL is the easiest way to tell that it's fishy. Look, the name of the company, Amazon isn't even spelled right in the URL here, or like it's got this crazy extension on it. And it's really easy a lot of times to tell just from the link. But the fact that they come to me and ask me, shows that like I have done good training. I've done like I don't sit them down and say, hey, we're going to do security awareness training right now. But what I will do is when I get phishing messages and text messages, I'll show those to them. So I think that's where they've learned it, is I show them, look at this ridiculous email that I've gotten. Look how bad this is, and maybe just over the years from me showing them this stuff, they've learned that. And then they
caught on.
Yeah. Then the other thing I was going to mention, I might have lost it. Going deep into that, I might have lost my other thought. It'll come back to me. Continue.
Yeah, phishing is still a powerful thing that we deal with every day, and probably worse now because you just get these mass email coming in, and hopefully somebody's gonna click on it. If they send 10,000 in 3 clicks, I mean, that's already better than not getting anything for them.
Oh, I remembered. So the other thing is your financial institution. In a lot of cases, you can contact them and say, you can have them put a note on your account that says, hey, I want to set a password for my account. Like any kind of major thing with my account, you're gonna ask me for this password before you agree to do it. And I've personally done this in the past, and it works. Every single time you try to deposit money, take out money, do a wire, anything like that, they will contact you or they will ask you for this password. That's an option for a lot of financial institutions that will prevent this, just random, let's change the bank account, the destination for where this wire is going.
And that's similar to the PIN number that you put on your cellular provider account that they ask you for anytime you make a change to reroute your number, as an example, right? I also
it's basically second factor, right?
Yeah, I like that, but I also like the notification too. And one of the things, especially when you get talking to parents in your neighborhood and your kids' sports teams, and because everyone has this problem of my kid can buy stuff in either the Apple Store or the Apple App Store or on Xbox ecosystem. And I was like, look, I have a lot of technical, knowledge and things that I could implement to prevent this because I do security. I'm like, but you know what I found works the best? I use one credit card for all of those services, and that credit card sends me a text message if a charge goes through. That way you can get ahead of it, right? You're not waiting until the end of the month and you get that bill and you're like, wow, you spent $987 in the Xbox store this month. That's really bad. It tells you as things happen. And now my kids know to ask permission because they know if they do something without permission, that Dad's going to get a text message, and I'm going to know right away. I'm like, hey, I didn't authorize you to, even if it's $3. I'm like, I didn't authorize. Was that you? First question is, was that you? Right? Because if it's not, then it's a different type of investigation. And they go, yeah, it was me. I'm like, that was only $3, but you have to ask permission for every charge, right? And I'm like, now go do a chore to earn your $3, for that. And it's a whole system in my house now, which I think works pretty well.
$900 is going to take a lot of time to work off.
Yes. You want to nip it in the bud.
I have the same thing on one credit card. Every time something gets charged, I know right away. I get an email immediately. Mm-hmm. But here's an example. Last year, one of my aunt got her email hacked and found out that I was coming to visit my mother. So she called me and she said, well, every time I send an email, I get no response. I'm like, well, that's kind of strange. So I started looking at their email, logged in and everything. And I sent her a couple of emails and they disappeared and they never showed up in the inbox. So after a while, I asked her to log in into the Yahoo account and started doing a search for my email address and found the emails in the deleted folder. I'm like, how is that even possible? So our email got hacked, and the hacker actually put the rule to delete every email that came into the mailbox, the inbox, and forward whoever hacked the email a copy of each email back to the person that managed to compromise their email.
Yeah, I've seen that in Office.
I've seen that on Exchange.
Office 365, it's super scary because I did an investigation and I used, I think the open source tool is called Falcon, and I had to use, it's like a forensics tool for Active Directory. And
not related to CrowdStrike.
Not related to CrowdStrike. I think it's Falcon or Hawk or I'm like, Tyler, what do I use? Because email, like select emails are being routed somewhere else and I can't find them. And I think this is part of this somewhat elaborate phishing attack. And he turned me onto this tool and now I can't remember it was like Falcon or Hawk or something like that. And so I ran this tool. And I'm not like a Windows, Linux and Unix are my background. Like I know enough about Windows to do basic stuff. But going through all the logs, I was able to trace it back and go, no, someone added a rule. But that rule, unlike your Yahoo example, right, doesn't show up in the user. It's like you can bury rules in Office 365 or in AD. And the rule was buried, and they were redirecting certain emails to certain folders to complete their scam, basically. So it's very similar to what you're talking about, Guy.
So I ended up to fix this. So I got rid of the rule. I should have took a snapshot of it first because it would have been a great example for teaching. But so I set her up to do two-factor authentication for each of her emails. So if somebody tried to access her email, she would have to approve it on her phone. So if anybody has Yahoo or Outlook or anything like this, maybe you should consider putting two-factor on your phone so that if somebody tried to use your email, you would get a text or an email saying that someone is trying to access it, and you can approve or deny it. Obviously, it would deny it, but at least you're tracking.
SMS isn't horrible. It's a certain level of second factor, right? Multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
If you're being targeted, it helps. But if you're being targeted, it may not protect that level, because Darknet Diaries, Jack recited a great episode and described one of the tactics for SIM swapping. And one of the tactics involves someone walking into an AT&T or Verizon store and stealing the manager's tablet and knowing that they have about an hour window where they can use that tablet to SIM swap.
I've heard the social engineering, but stealing the tablet.
They actually go in. Now, the providers are onto it. Like, they used to be able to have it for much longer, but the providers now know about it, right? The providers now know about this attack. That's a lot of power in
one tablet.
But they've, you described working in instant response, right? The cellular providers now have a response plan and are trying to get that recovery time within an hour or less. So now the attackers know they've got an hour window to SIM swap as much stuff as they can, because they only need a small amount of time to gain access to whatever, in this example's cryptocurrency account, to go, now I can just basically wipe out the money in the crypto wallet. So again, it depends on how you're being targeted. I don't want to discourage people from using SMS because it is better than nothing. But keep in mind, if you have cryptocurrency, as an example, you might want to go to the next level, use an authenticator app or something different.
Yeah, true. Yeah, so being compromised is never a fun thing.
No,
especially they were trying to take a trip in the Maritimes and they couldn't send any paperwork or didn't think they were receiving it because her email was being deleted and forwarded somewhere else.
Awesome stuff, Guy. Hey, Guy, I just have 5 questions left for you as we round out the interview. Are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Sure.
3 words.
If I had the answer.
There's no right or wrong answer to this game, to this question. So it's very easy. 3 words to describe yourself.
I guess I'm a security geek for the last 40 plus years.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Packets.
If you wrote it's awesome. If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Pardon me?
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Autobiography.
Seeker of Security.
What is your favorite hacker movie?
My favorite hacker book.
Hacker movie.
Oh, movie. I don't really have one.
Have you watched any hacker movies? Like Hackers?
Oh, I've watched a lot of hacker movies.
You don't have a favorite?
And
They all
just
fall in the
that
same
bad?
bucket for you. They're all
bad.
Well,
they're all bad.
everything happens too quickly. That's how I see it.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Oh yeah. It's not realistic,
But-
definitely.
You can't break into the United States Department of Defense in 1 minute with a gun to your head? Come on. How do you call yourself a hacker, man?
I don't think that was
You're on all these Linux command in 1 minute and you're in the system.
There needs to be a 3D interface involved.
That's right.
Yeah.
Written in Visual Basic.
Guy, choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive,
Living,
dead, or
fictional
otherwise. I
To
got
be
it wrong.
my parents. Actually, I don't know. Didn't even really think about that. So I have no answer.
You can make stuff up. You can, it can be anyone from history, fictional or non-fictional, or
Well, really, I'm stumped. I guess maybe you could be my father.
Luke. I'm
Have you
your
ever
father.
been picked
That
before,
might,
Paul?
that might
I don't
not be
think I
that
have.
good, though. But
No, I have been
Anyway.
picked once or twice in the past, so and it's probably not that great, but I'm flattered.
Paul is a time traveler.
That's right.
I went back in time.
Keith, thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly.
I had lots of fun.
Fantastic. Everyone stay tuned. Security news coming up next.
Oh.